Alright, one thing that I should mention, there's a lot of people that are angry with me for telling the truth about them. One thing that I kept secret with most of the women that I spoke out about is their involvement in prostitution. Yes, I do believe in shaming people for doing wrong. And no, I'm not saying that prostitution is right. What I'm saying is that I won't shame people for having to be prostitutes. There are a few women like Amanda, who is a prostitute and a stripper, who I did bring that to light. There's a reason for this. It's because the things that she did were so incredibly ugly and terrible that yes, I will use that to shame them. But there are a lot of other women who are mad at me because I exposed certain aspects of their life that were directly involved with mine, directly involved with my case, directly involved with my situation and scenario. And their prostitution didn't have anything to do with any of that. That aside, there's about 30 of them or so. There's actually hundreds, but there's about 30 of them that I could have used them having to be prostitutes. And I know a lot of you guys are going to argue about, oh no, they didn't have to be. Well, you guys think it's easy to get these resources, but in reality, you end up spending more resources to get these resources, possibly get these resources, than you will ever get out of them if you do get these resources. So prostitution becomes labor of love. It's not that they love being a prostitute, it's that most of them have children. Many of them have drug addictions, yes, that's true. But for many more of them, it's just the fact that after being abused so terribly, many of them abused sexually, they realize that prostitution is a way to make money, it's a way to make ends meet, it's a way to feed their children, and it's a way to pay for the gasoline to get to these different resources, possible resources. If you have sex for 20 minutes and you get $50, and I know a lot of you guys are like, oh, prostitutes get paid more than that. You'd be surprised. When I was at Pine Ridge Job Corps Center, there was a young lady there who was having sex for packs of cigarettes, literally. And I know that a pack of cigarettes isn't a necessity like food. But there's a lot of these women who are angry with me, who didn't want their secrets being out there, and I still to this day have not told the world that they were prostitutes. There's a reason for this. They should have never had to be forced into prostitution, and they were forced. Not all of them were sex trafficked. By sex trafficking, I mean that they were held against their will and forced to do this. But there are a lot of them that literally were. There's a lot of them that actually gave me permission to tell their stories about that. They just didn't want their children to know. One of them, she tried to help me out while I was in the jail down there in Arapahoe County, and her help was not allowed to arrive. It never arrived. It never showed up. That money never showed up. Money for a telephone or for telephone calls. See, that's the thing, is that communication was prevented at every step along the way, whether it be through the telephone, through the internet, through Facebook bans, with many people who call everything that I post spam, and I have record of this. There were hundreds of people who were doing this, and many of them continue to do this to this day. Try to make sure that everything that I say is shut down. There's a woman on my Facebook three women on my Facebook who complain about the same things that I do. That when they're suicidal, and they're hurting and they need help, they can't say it, or they'll end up on a Facebook ban. They end up with that suicide hotline bullshit. I've called suicide hotline. They send me to other numbers, to send me to other numbers, to send me to other numbers. What I needed was somebody who knows me, to love me enough, to care enough, to do something themselves instead of trying to pawn me off to services that don't work. And then when those services don't work, they treat me like I didn't try, like I didn't call. That's a lot of the reason many of these women were forced into prostitution. In order to make it to your meetings that you have to go through every week or every other week, in order to get your food services, or in order to make your quota for going to therapy or other government mandated meetings that don't do anything. In order to make it to those, you have to have money for things as simple as gas. Just gas. $50 in gas will get you to, well, if you're living in your vehicle, it doesn't get you far at all. But that $50 in gas will get you to 1 or 2 appointments. And it'll allow you to travel to where those appointments send you, even though they may end up being a dead end. That $50 for selling your body might be enough to get your phone turned back on so that you can call somebody who's not a government worker who might actually help. A lot of these women, they have to worry about their children getting taken by CPS, lying about them, and literally selling their children. There's a lot of men that I know who are in even worse conditions because they can't be prostitutes. There isn't the same demand for male prostitutes as there is for female prostitutes. I've known heterosexual males, however, who have resorted to prostitution, homosexual prostitution, in order to make ends meet. So this isn't something that is just specific to women. I want you to imagine with the stigmatism surrounding prostitution and surrounding men, and how it's acceptable for a woman to be a homosexual according to our society, but not for a man. And imagine the amount of pride that a single father has to swallow in order to prostitute himself, in order to make ends meet for him and his son, or him and his daughter. To get to these resources, that many of these resources will only help out women. They won't help out a man unless you want to count the legal services where if you're a felon, then they'll help you. Victor King, he stole a computer, and I almost went down for this computer because Victor, he set down the bag that he stole the computer. He set that bag down next to a bench. As I was walking by, police already had Victor sitting there, and they had me sit down next to the bag. And they wanted to grill me as if that bag was mine. No, they asked me to sit there. They told me to sit there. And then they grilled me after I sat there as if I had put that bag there myself. Well, Victor fessed up to that bag being his and the theft of that computer, and he now works for the state of Colorado Health and Human Services Department. How did he get that job? Well, because he's a felon. Because he literally committed a felony to try to make ends meet while he was strung out on methamphetamines. He already had a son by that point. And he didn't have to prostitute himself, but he didn't get that help. He was trying to get help for years before that happened. But they didn't help him until he committed a crime and got busted with it. A crime that they tried to peg on me. I know women from this very town. I'm in Chapel, Nebraska right now. I know women in this very town who have been prostitutes. And despite the things that they did to me and lied to me about, lied to the courts about even, or outright just omitted information, I still haven't shared the secrets about them being prostitutes. Now, if they did the things to me that Amanda did, yeah, I'd tell on them for that. I would shame them for being prostitutes. Do I think it's wrong to shame them for being prostitutes? Yes, I do. But I also think it's wrong for an innocent man to be punished and harmed because you won't come forward and tell the truth, because you were ashamed to tell the truth. A lot of these people didn't want to come forward because they were afraid of their shame coming forward, the things that they're ashamed to come forward about themselves. They didn't want those things coming to light, so I brought them to light. There are stories from several people that I saved for good reason, and I don't have access to those stories. They're on one of the computers that was stolen. But I have those stories, and I have permission to share those stories. One of those stories is from Mandy Hughes, and that story I would very much like to share with you all. I need to get that computer back from Wyoming in order to do that. And it's not to shame Mandy. I'm not going to put her name on it. She doesn't want her children knowing that there were certain things that she did when she was younger that she's not proud of. But the fact is, she gave me permission to share that story. And I have hundreds very similar to it, so you won't be able to tell which one's hers anyway. There are other people who gave me permission to use their names. People like Christine Buhit. I have her permission to share her story, despite the fact that she's angry with me. You know why she's angry with me? Because I didn't kill myself. She was going to help me, but she couldn't make the time and couldn't make the time. And then she was given housing. Why was she given housing? Because she got in trouble for heroin use. I might have made methamphetamines use because, much like Natalie Bollinger, she did both. Now then there's Christine's ex. His name's Ed Simmons. And Ed Simmons was addicted to heroin as well. Between Christine and Ed, I have a lot more respect for Ed, because while Christine chose heroin over her own child, Ed chose their child over his addictions. It's hard not to respect a man who does that. There's a lot of women I know who have had to resort to prostitution. Several of them I've spoken about. Several of them have done me incredible wrongs since what happened to Natalie. And still I haven't told those stories. I've told stories about these women that they might be equally as ashamed of. But the fact is, those stories had a direct involvement in the situation between me and Natalie. By direct involvement, I mean direct involvement. I don't mean that they directly knew Natalie or were directly aware of her situation or my situation with Natalie. It's the fact that their situations in damaging my ability to defend myself, either in public or in court, had to do with Natalie. All of the court stuff that I have had to deal with in the last 3 years, every single bit of it has had to do with Natalie and that situation. Every single one of the people who are angry with me are angry with me because of the repercussions of what happened with Natalie. The repercussions of them not coming forward, them not keeping their word, them being too afraid to do so. Well, they shouldn't have offered. You shouldn't have offered to help if you weren't willing to. You shouldn't have offered to help if you were going to be too ashamed to come forward with the truth. Now, every single person who did not come forward knew that this was coming. I let everyone know, don't tell me anything that you're not willing to tell the police, because I'll tell the police. And if the police won't listen, then I'll tell the public. You can deny it all you want to the public, but the fact is you shouldn't have told me to begin with. With Mandy Hughes, her situation is very screwed up because, well, she made a lot of promises that she didn't keep. But that doesn't make her a bad person. She had fears of her own. Fear of Ted Bollinger. Imagine that. She needed to come forward, but she was afraid to. Many people were afraid.